Okay, 2 Samuel chapter 15, getting more into this story of Absalom and David trying to reconcile and get all this mess behind them. Absalom's going to have a bit of a change of heart here, unfortunately. So verse 1, it came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate, and it was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, Of what city art thou? And he said, Thy servant is one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom said unto him, See, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. So let's just pause here for a second to kind of get some context around this. So Absalom wants to meet the king. Remember, he's trying to get up there. Sounds like the king's not really favorable to talk to him. And Absalom is starting to realize that there's a problem here. David is kind of not following his own rules. He's not doing what he should as a king. He's kind of failing his people, not being a good governor and ruler for them. So what he decides to do is he, as the king's son, he's going to make himself appear more kingly. Basically, if he's not getting his royal job back, basically, he's kind of kicked out of the royal family, he's still going to act like he is. So he gets some chariots and he gets 50 men to run in front of those chariots. So he has this procession that makes him look like royalty. Basically, he kind of is, but kind of isn't in a way. So he makes himself look royal and look amazing, like he's part of this royalty. He's a very important person, and he goes to the gates of the city. Now, if you remember from the law of Moses time, that they learned that is where usually the prophets and others would sit and then pass judgment on other people, is at the gates of the city. And they would, that was where judgments would happen. So if somebody has an argument, they would go to the gates of the city, look for a representative of the royal court to talk with and say, hey, here's what we got to do. And then that person would then adjudicate whatever needed to be done for this situation. So Absalom rises early. He gets up to the gate and he's up there. He's in his royal procession. He's probably wearing more royal clothing as well. So he looks really wealthy, and the family of the royals and everything else, as if he's back in power, back in the position he used to be in when he isn't, basically. But then he pulls this together and he basically says, look, nobody else is here from the kingdom to help you, so I will help you out. Basically, I'll work with this. So he kind of unofficially takes over this role of being in the royalty position. And that's what he's doing, basically. Verse 4, Absalom said, moreover, Oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which had any suit or cause might come unto me, that I would do him justice. And it was so that when any man came nigh to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand and took him and kissed him. And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So most likely what's happening here is basically the king and his organization in the government basically they're not doing their duties. They're not helping people with this. So there's problems because there's no one to judge Israel. There's no one to affect those laws, to deal with the issues of the law. So the king has kind of abdicated a lot of his responsibilities, not looking so good. We don't know exactly why. Could be health problems David has. Could be just depression maybe David's in, was sorrowful with all the sins and the problems that he's got in his life from his bad choices. There's a lot of things that could go into that. But what's happening is basically there is a power vacuum in the government. And so Absalom is stepping up to take this. And he is treating people, hugging them, kissing them, doing these things. He's helping these people to deal with their problems. And he's treating them equal, basically. He's treating them really good. And so that ingratiates everybody. Oh, Absalom is like the best part of the government. He is the part that's working, and everybody else is terrible at this. So he steals the hearts of the people. Basically, they like Absalom more than they like David because Absalom is helping them. Absalom is working with them and doing those things. The king should be helping and doing this, but he's not. Basically, so Absalom gets to fill this void basically, that's out there. So, verse 7, and it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. For thy servant vowed a vow while I abode at Geshur in Syria, saying, If the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. And the king said unto him, Go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. So it sounds like Absalom has gotten in with David. They've talked, maybe they've reconciled some stuff out. Absalom's a part of the royal family, but maybe not restored to his old duties and responsibilities. But he's kind of taking things on himself. And now he's saying, hey, I made a promise. After I fled, after I killed my stepbrother Amnon, I made a promise that if I ever got back to Israel, if God helped me get back, or back into Jerusalem and get back into the family and things, that I would serve him. I would go give my obeisance and stuff. So I need to go to Hebron for a while to pay my obligations, basically, to God. And so David's like, oh, okay, that sounds fair. Go for it. Let's see, this is verse 10. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, As soon as ye hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. So Absalom has a plan. Again, secret combination. Basically, it's happening here. He is putting out spies. He's got people in his organization that are going out there, and what they're going to do is they're going to convince the people, when this happens, say this, because we want this effect. We want people to believe that Absalom is taking over rule. Basically, he is ruling, basically, and grow his power so that he can be seen in the people's eyes as the ruler, basically. 11, and with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. So he's got 200 men. They're going up to Hebron to offer their oblations and to take care of all this. This is his royal entourage with him. They don't have a clue what's going on. They just know they're helping to escort Absalom up there to do all this. So there's other people that Absalom has connected with that are subtly putting that message out there to change the perception of the people to make it look better for him, basically. Verse 12, and Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gihon, while he offered sacrifices. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. So David's up offering his oblations. He's doing his sacrifices. While there, he's laying plans to gather people together to form a rebellion against King David. And he calls Ahithophel, I think that's how you say it. He's one of David's counselors. So he has access to the royal court, and he is bringing him in as part of his operation to deal with this, to form this revolution, basically. So here's something here that Clark in his Bible commentary said about this. He said, it is very difficult to account for this general defection of the people. Several reasons are given. One, David was old or afflicted and could not well attend to the administration of justice in the land. Two, it does appear that the king did not attend the affairs of state and that there were no properly appointed judges in the land. That's why there was nobody at the gates to adjudicate things, basically. So he didn't fill those spots in the government. Three, Joab's power was overgrown. He was wicked and insolent, oppressive to the people, and David was afraid to execute the laws against him. So that's another one that they're looking at here to say that maybe Joab, who was the right-hand man for King David, kind of had got himself in a position where he was kind of in power. David was really in power, but Joab was actually the one making the decisions and things, and David didn't want to mess with him, was kind of afraid of him. So the fourth one, let's see, where did I go? Lost my place. There it is. Fourth, there were still some partisans of the house of Saul who thought the crown not fairly obtained by David. So maybe some of the family of Saul, remember the whole household of Saul that was left was given to David, wives and all given to David. Those are the wives, the extra wives that David had been given that God said you're okay with. Remember, David had multiple wives. He had one wife that was the daughter of Saul. Saul took her away, so he married somebody else, and then he got his first wife back, and then he got the rest of Saul's wives as he became the king, and Saul's house got basically blended into David's family and household. And so maybe there were some people in the kingdom who still thought Saul was the rightful ruler and not David. So maybe they were part of this defection as well. Verse 5, or the fifth reason, David was under the displeasure of the Almighty for his adultery with Bathsheba and his murder of Uriah, and God let his enemies loose against him. Verse 6, there are always troublesome and disaffected men in every state and under every government, who can never rest and are ever hoping for something from a change. 7, Absalom appeared to be the real and was the undisputed heir to the throne. David could not, in the course of nature, live very long, and most people are more disposed to hail the beams of the rising than exult in those of the setting sun. No doubt some of these causes operated, and perhaps most of them exerted less or more influence in this most scandalous business. So there could be more going on here that we're not getting in the story, basically, in the Old Testament of what's going on. But that's most likely what is happening here, basically. Is Absalom is pulling together a conspiracy. Maybe it's part of God's not with David, so the enemies of David are rising up. They have David is weak. He doesn't have God to protect him and help him. So there's an opportunity for the enemies of David, and maybe they have worked with Absalom to get him up there. There's a lot of different factors that could go into this. So let's get to verse 13. And there came a messenger to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. So someone has figured out what's going on and is now telling David, hey, David, your son Absalom is creating a revolution against you. He's getting the people to go his way against you. Verse 14, and David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee. For we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us and smite the city with the edge of the sword. This is a huge change for David. Okay, David has never fled in his all the stories, all the conquests we have. He's usually like, gather the army, let's go fight, and he usually wins. Now, and this could be because David knows, one, he's probably derelict with his duty. The people don't like him, and he can't blame him for not liking him because he hasn't done his job. Absalom has done a good job of sneaking in and putting things in place to get his own way in there. David does not have God with him, which means David has to fight under his own power, and he's not confident that he could win without God's help, basically, and he knows that he doesn't have God's help. Verse 15, the king's servants said unto the king, behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. So they're saying, we're with you, David, we're going to follow you. So verse 16, the king went forth, and all his household after him, and the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house. And the king went forth, and all the people after him, and tarried in a place that was far off. And all his servants passed on beside him, and all the Cherethites, and all the Pelethites, and the Gittites, 600 men which came after him from Gath, passed on before the king. Then said the king to Ittai the Gittite, wherefore goest thou also with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and also an exile. So these are the other people who are not of Israel necessarily directly, that have kind of mixed in with Israelite blood, and they're in with the Israelites. And King David's going, look, why are you guys out over here with us? Go back to your lands. You're fine. You don't need to worry about Absalom. You're a stranger. It's me that has got to worry. Verse 20, whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us? Seeing I go whither I may, return thou and take back thy brethren. Mercy and truth be with thee. And Ittai answered the king and said, as the Lord liveth, and as my lord the king liveth, surely in what place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. So the king here, basically to Ittai the Gittite, so he's going, go, you don't need to worry about this. This isn't your fight, you don't have to worry about it. And he's saying, no, I am your servant. I will go where you go. I will deal with the fate that you get as well, basically, showing his loyalty to the king. And verse 22, and David said to Ittai, go and pass over. And Ittai the Gittite passed over, and all his men, and all the little ones that were with him. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over. The king also himself passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. So they're leaving Israel to go hide. Verse 24, and lo, Zadok also and all the Levites were with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God, and they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had done passing out of the city. And the king said unto Zadok, carry back the ark of God into the city. If I shall find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me again and show me both it and his habitation. But if he thus say, I have no delight in thee, behold, here am I, let him do to me as seemeth good unto him. And the king said also unto Zadok the priest, art not thou a seer? Return into the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz thy son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will tarry in the plain of the wilderness until there come word from you to certify me. So he's telling Zadok, take the Ark of the Covenant back. It doesn't belong out here with us. It belongs in Jerusalem. And go back to the city with your sons. You're going to be fine. And find out, you are a seer. You can see the future. You can see things that others can't. Find out if I can come back or not. Basically, he's trying to understand the will of God for him. Verse 29, Zadok therefore and Abiathar carried the ark of God again to Jerusalem, and they tarried there. And David went up by the ascent of Mount Olivet, and wept as he went up, and had his head covered, and he went barefoot. And all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and they went up, weeping as they went up. So he's going up the hill, crying, he's wept, he's sorrowful, probably because of his sins, the side effects and results of his sins, the plight, the problems that he's had. The people are following him, going along with him as well. Clark had some interesting comments on this as well. He said, this was the first time that David turned his back to his enemies. And why did he now flee? Jerusalem, far from not being in a state to sustain a siege, was so strong that even the blind and the lame were supposed to be a sufficient defense for the walls. And he had still with him his faithful Cherethites and Pelethites, besides 600 faithful Gittites who were perfectly willing to follow his fortunes. There does not appear any reason why such a person in such circumstances should not act on the defensive, at least till he should be fully satisfied of the real complexion of affairs. But he appears to take all as coming from the hand of God. Therefore he humbles himself, weeps, goes barefoot, and covers his head. He does not even hasten his departure, for the habit of mourners is not the habit of those who are flying before the face of their enemies. He sees the storm, yet he yields to what he conceives to be the tempest of the Almighty. So what Clark in his Bible commentary is saying here basically is David realizes he's looking at this as punishment from God, not just result of things happening in this world. So he sees it as a punishment of God, so he's leaving. Basically, he's getting out of there. He's sorrowful for what's happening. He's not trying to take the defensive. He had enough men. He could have, and he's in the city wall, so he could have built his defenses up and just said, we're going to hunker down and protect our city in case there is a revolt. And then we're going to wait and see what happens, basically. And then if there's a fight, maybe he will run and flee at that point. He's not doing any of that. He's not taking the defensive position prior to that. He's just leaving because he knows he's wrong. He probably feels like this is the hand of God moving against him. So he's accepting his fate and moving basically without it. Pretty interesting. Now, verse 31, and one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. Remember, Ahithophel was his counselor. And David said, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. So he's praying, going, please bless that anything Ahithophel says, basically just, the plans don't work out, basically. They don't come to pass. Verse 32, and it came to pass that when David was come to the top of the mount where he worshipped God, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat rent upon the earth, and the earth upon his head. Unto whom David said, If thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden unto me. But if thou return to the city and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, as I have been thy father's servant hitherto, so will I now also be thy servant. Then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. So he's sending one of his servants back into the palace to say, I will serve Absalom as the king, and basically he's going to be a wrench in the works for Absalom and what Ahithophel is trying to do. Verse 35, And hast thou not there with thee Zadok and Abiathar the priests? Therefore it shall be that what things soever thou shalt hear out of the king's house, thou shalt tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. So he's saying, you go basically be in there, you find out, you're the mole inside their organization. They use my counselor against me as a mole, so you're going to be the mole against them. And you tell Zadok and his son about it, and word will get back to me. Verse 36, Behold, they have there with them their two sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son. And by them ye shall send unto me everything that ye can hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. So David's got a spy now in the new kingdom as Absalom is going to put himself into power and go through this. Let's jump to the next chapter to see what happens with all this mess that's going on.